Title: The Perfect Alibi. Ethan Carter is convinced his wife, Olivia, is cheating. The signs are everywhere: late nights at work, secretive phone calls, sudden coldness in their marriage. When he hires a private investigator, the evidence piles up. Olivia meeting an unknown man, exchanging discreet touches, and even checking into a hotel under a false name. But the deeper Ethan digs, the more tangled the mystery becomes. The investigator warns him that something about Olivia's behavior doesn't add up. She's too careful, too precise, as if she wants to be caught. Determined to confront her, Ethan follows her one night, only to be led into a trap. He wakes up in a motel room with blood on his hands, and the investigator dead beside him. The murder weapon? A knife from his own kitchen. That's when Olivia steps in, calm and composed. "You were never supposed to find out this way," she says, watching him with an eerie detachment. "But I suppose I'll have to speed up the plan." It turns out Olivia wasn't cheating. She was orchestrating everything. The texts, the hotel meetings, the affair, all planted evidence. She'd manipulated every move Ethan made, guiding him into a carefully laid-out trap. And now, with a dead body in the room and overwhelming evidence tying him to the crime, he's about to take the fall for a murder she committed. "Why?" he asks, voice shaking. She smirks. "Because I needed a clean way out, and you just made it so easy." With law enforcement closing in, Ethan realizes Olivia's game isn't over yet. She's playing a long con, one with motives far beyond an affair. The question is, can he outplay her before it's too late? The Perfect Alibi. Continued. Ethan's heart pounds in his chest as Olivia stares at him, a smirk playing on her lips. The motel room feels smaller, suffocating, the dead body of the investigator sprawled across the stained carpet between them. The acrid scent of blood lingers in the air. "You planned this," Ethan breathes, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Every single step." Olivia tilts her head, feigning amusement. "Of course I did. You always underestimated me, Ethan. You thought I was just your sweet, loyal wife. But I was always 10 steps ahead." His mind races. Every inconsistency, every red flag, the way she seemed almost too careless, the hotel check-ins under a false name, the investigator's cryptic warnings, all of it was deliberate. She wanted him to suspect her. She wanted him to investigate. And now, standing in a motel room with a dead body and evidence that screamed his guilt, he understood why. "You killed him," Ethan whispers. "And you're going to take the fall." His breath catches. "But why?" His voice trembles, a mix of fear and rage bubbling up. "What the hell did I ever do to you?" Olivia sighs, shaking her head as if he were a naive child. "Ethan, this isn't about you. Not entirely. You were just convenient." She steps closer, lowering her voice. "Did you ever wonder why I started acting differently? Why I let you suspect me? It was all necessary." "Necessary for what?" he demands. She leans in, whispering, "To get away with murder." A chill runs down his spine. Olivia glances at the corpse on the floor, then back at Ethan with a casual shrug. "Detective Langston here wasn't just some private investigator you hired. He was digging into things he shouldn't have. Things about me." Ethan's stomach twists. "What are you talking about?" Olivia sighs. "I suppose there's no harm in telling you now, since, well, this is the end of the road for you." She steps back, her expression unreadable. Langston wasn't just investigating an affair, he was looking into offshore accounts, shell companies, and some unfortunate accidents tied to my name. But I couldn't have him exposing my past. And I definitely couldn't let the police find out I had anything to do with his death. Her smirk returns, colder this time. "So I made sure they'd find you instead." Ethan's pulse hammers as realization crashes over him. The missing kitchen, knife, the hotel reservation under his name, the text messages. God, had she been texting herself from his phone? You framed me, he murmurs. Olivia nods, pleased. I really did, and I must say you walked right into it. Before he can react, there's a loud bang, the sound of the motel door being kicked open. Police! Hands where we can see them! Ethan barely has time to register the flashing red and blue lights outside before Olivia takes 2 quick steps back, raising her hands in mock surrender. He killed him! She screams, pointing at Ethan. Oh my God, I tried to stop him! The officers storm in, guns drawn. Ethan's world slows to a crawl. He sees the horror on the officers' faces as they take in the blood, the corpse, the knife, the one she had just slipped near his hand. His mouth goes dry. She wasn't just orchestrating an affair, she was orchestrating his downfall. And unless he figured out a way to turn the tables, she was going to get away with everything. To be continued. The Perfect Alibi. Part 3. The room erupts in chaos. On your knees, hands behind your head. Ethan barely processes the command before he's forced to the ground, cold steel cuffs snapping around his wrists. His mind is a whirlwind of panic and realization. Olivia stands just feet away, shaking, crocodile tears streaming down her cheeks as she plays the role of a terrified wife. He just lost control, she sobs, voice trembling. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. He killed that man. Ethan's voice finally finds him. She's lying! He struggles against the officers restraining him. I didn't kill him. Check the security footage. Check her phone. She set me up. But his words sound hollow, swallowed by the overwhelming weight of the scene. A murdered investigator, a bloody knife at his feet, his fingerprints smeared on the handle. Olivia, the perfect grieving wife, sobbing in the background. He sees it in the officers' eyes. They think they already know the truth. Tell it to your lawyer, one of them mutters as they haul him to his feet. Ethan locks eyes with Olivia as they drag him toward the door. And that's when he sees it, the tiniest smirk curling at the corner of her lips. She won. For now. The frame-up deepens. The police station is a blur of fluorescent lights, handcuffs, and the relentless echo of a ringing phone. Ethan is processed, fingerprinted, photographed. The detective questioning him, a no-nonsense woman named Detective Avery Grant, regards him with cold skepticism. You expect me to believe, she says, flipping through the file, that your wife planned this entire thing, staged an affair, planted evidence, murdered a private investigator, all to frame you? Yes, Ethan leans forward, and I can prove it. Olivia's hiding something bigger than just this. The investigator I hired, Langston, he wasn't just looking into my suspicions of an affair, he was looking into her. That's why she killed him. Grant doesn't look convinced. If that were true, she says, closing the file, why would she call 911 and stay on the scene? Why wouldn't she just disappear? Ethan exhales sharply. Olivia had covered her tracks too well. She had manipulated the narrative so perfectly that anything he said now only made him sound more desperate, and desperate men don't sound innocent. You get one call, Grant finally says. Ethan doesn't hesitate. There's only one person who might believe him. A desperate gamble. Pick up, damn it. The line clicks. A groggy but familiar voice answers. Vincent? Ethan exhales in relief. Listen, man. I don't have time to explain, but I need your help. Olivia set me up. She killed my investigator, Langston. The cops think I did it, and unless I find a way to prove the truth, Vincent Carmichael, his best friend and a high-profile defense attorney, cuts him off. Jesus, Ethan, I just saw the news. They're saying you went insane, that you thought Olivia was cheating, so you killed the guy following her. This looks bad. Ethan's stomach churns. Olivia had made sure to shape the media narrative before. He even had a chance to fight back. "Listen to me," Ethan says through gritted teeth. "This isn't about an affair. This is about something bigger." Olivia needed Langston dead. She needed me out of the way. And whatever the hell she's been hiding, it's still out there. I need you to dig, Vincent. Find out what Langston was investigating. Find out what Olivia didn't want him to uncover. There's a long pause. Then Vincent sighs. "All right, I'll look into it. But Ethan, this is a long shot. If we don't find something fast, you're looking at a murder conviction." Ethan swallows hard. "Then we better move fast." Olivia's next move back. At home, Olivia Carter pours herself a glass of red wine, standing by the window as the city lights twinkle beyond the skyline. Her phone vibrates. She checks the message. Unknown number. It's done. The cops believe the story. He's finished. A slow, satisfied smile spreads across her lips. She types back. "Olivia. Good. Now what about the offshore accounts?" A pause. Then, a reply. Unknown number. They're buried. No one will find them. As far as the world knows, Ethan Carter is a jealous husband who snapped. The perfect alibi. Olivia chuckles softly, taking a sip of her wine, just as planned. To be continued. Does Ethan uncover the deeper conspiracy? Who is Olivia working with? And can he prove the truth before it's too late? Would you like me to continue with Ethan's escape from the legal trap, his counterattack, or another major twist? The Perfect Alibi. Part 5. The Race to Find. Kessler Ethan sat in the back seat of Vincent's car, staring out at the rain-streaked city streets as they sped toward the safe house where Robert Kessler had last been seen. The urgency in his chest was suffocating. He knew Olivia and Elliot Vance were closing in. If they got to Kessler first, he was as good as dead. Vincent, gripping the wheel tightly, muttered, "We have to move fast. Rourke said Kessler's been off the grid, but someone just tried to access one of his burner accounts. Either he's on the run, or someone is tracking him." Ethan turned to Julian Rourke, who sat in the passenger seat, checking his laptop. "You think Olivia found him?" "Could be," Rourke replied, cigarette dangling from his lips. "But here's the thing. Kessler's smart. If he's trying to move money, it means he's desperate. He knows they're coming for him." Ethan's mind raced. Olivia was methodical, but she was also ruthless. She wouldn't just kill Kessler, she'd make sure. There was no trace of his existence. If they didn't get to him first, the last piece of evidence tying her to the offshore accounts would vanish. Vincent pulled the car to a stop outside a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of town. A single flickering street lamp cast eerie shadows against the cracked pavement. "Safe house?" Ethan asked, glancing at the decaying building. "More like a last resort," Rourke muttered. "If he's holed up here, it means he's out of options." The three men stepped out of the car. Ethan's nerves were razor-sharp as they moved toward the entrance. Vincent knocked. "Kessler! It's Vincent Carmichael! We need to talk!" Silence. Then a rustling inside, a frantic scraping sound. "Shit," Rourke muttered. "Someone's in there." Ethan's instincts took over. He shoved the door open just in time to see Robert Kessler, pale, sweaty, and clutching a briefcase, bolting toward the fire. "Escape! Kessler, stop!" Ethan shouted. Kessler hesitated, eyes wild with fear. I can't. They'll kill me." "They're already coming for you," Vincent said. "But if you want to survive, you need us." For a second, it looked like Kessler might listen, until the crack of a gunshot shattered the night. A bullet tore through the window, missing Kessler by inches. "Sniper!" Rourke yelled, tackling Ethan and Vincent to the ground. Kessler screamed, dropping his briefcase as he scrambled back into the apartment. Ethan rolled behind an overturned couch, heart pounding. Through the shattered window, he spotted a dark figure retreating across the rooftops. "Vance's people!" Vincent spat. "They knew we'd come for him!" Another shot rang out, splintering the door frame. Ethan turned to Kessler, who was hyperventilating, hands shaking. "Kessler, if you want to live, we need to move. Now!" Kessler stared at him, then at the briefcase, and then, finally, he nodded. Kessler's secrets. An hour later, they were holed up in one of Rourke's safe houses, a dimly lit warehouse on the edge of town. Kessler sat trembling in a chair, wiping sweat from his brow. "You don't understand," he whispered. "Olivia, she's not just laundering money. She and Vance, they've been buying people. Judges, politicians, law enforcement, they own people." Ethan clenched his fists. "And you helped them." Kessler swallowed hard. "I didn't have a choice. At first, it was just moving money, hiding assets. But then it got darker, bribes, blackmail, and when Langston started sniffing around, he wiped his face. "She ordered me to clean up the mess." "Meaning what?" Vincent demanded. Kessler hesitated, then admitted, "I was the one who gave her Langston's location. I didn't know she was going to kill him. I thought she'd pay him off, make him disappear, like she always does." Ethan exhaled sharply. Olivia had manipulated everyone, including Kessler. Rourke crossed his arms. "You have proof of all this?" Kessler hesitated, then grabbed his briefcase and popped it open. Inside were stacks of documents, USB drives, and, most importantly, a black ledger. Ethan's eyes locked onto it. "What is this?" Kessler's voice was barely a whisper. "The records. Every transaction. Every bribe. Every name." Ethan's blood ran cold. "This is enough to bring her down." Vincent nodded. "And if we leak it, there's no way even her connections can save her." Rourke cracked his knuckles. "We need to move fast. If Olivia knows Kessler's still breathing, she's gonna send more than just a sniper next time." Kessler paled. "You don't understand. It's not just Olivia coming for me, it's Vance. He'll burn this whole city to the ground before he lets this get out." Ethan's jaw tightened. Olivia wasn't just a criminal. She had built an empire. And now, she was going to unleash hell to keep it. Olivia's next move back in her penthouse, Olivia stared at her laptop screen, lips pressed into a thin line. She had just received an encrypted message. "Unknown number, Kessler escaped. He's with Ethan. They have the ledger." A slow, simmering rage built in her chest. The Perfect Alibi, Part 6. The leaked ledger. Ethan sat in the dimly lit warehouse, staring at the open ledger on the table. The weight of its contents pressed down on him like a vice. Inside those pages were the names of powerful people. Judges, senators, law enforcement officials, all of them bought and controlled by Olivia and Elliot Vance. If he leaked this, it wouldn't just be her empire that crumbled. It would trigger a war among the city's most powerful. Vincent and Rourke stood nearby, both tense. "We leaked this," Rourke muttered, lighting a cigarette. "And we don't just make enemies. We paint targets on our backs." Vincent nodded. "Olivia's not gonna run. She's gonna fight. And Vance, that guy doesn't lose." Ethan turned to Kessler, who sat trembling in the corner. "If we do this, I need to know everything Olivia has planned. Every contingency, every account, every kill order she's ever issued." Kessler swallowed hard, eyes darting toward the laptop. "I can access one of her emergency communication lines. If she's putting a hit out on you, it'll be there." Ethan nodded. "Do it." Kessler's fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing firewalls and encryption layers. Seconds later, a secured email inbox appeared, and there it was. A message sent from Olivia just 20 minutes ago. To Blackbird subject, contingency plan, alpha priority target, Ethan Carter status, immediate termination, primary executor, Elliot Vance assets. Deployed, multiple teams. Ethan's blood ran cold. "They're coming," Kessler whispered. "She's sending everyone after you." Vincent grabbed his gun. "We need to move. Now." Ethan clenched his jaw. No, running wouldn't stop her. Olivia would just keep hunting him until he was in the ground. He turned to Rourke. "Can you leak the ledger right now?" Rourke hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "Yeah, but once it's out there, there's no undoing it." "Do it." Rourke didn't ask again. He inserted the USB drive into his laptop, typed out a message, and uploaded the files to several anonymous whistleblower sites. Within seconds, the bay damage was irreversible. Olivia's empire was burning, and then a gunshot shattered the window. "Down!" Vincent roared, tackling Kessler just as another bullet tore through the wall. The warehouse erupted into chaos. The sound of tires screeching outside, heavy boots pounding against the pavement. They were already here. The ambush Ethan grabbed his pistol and ducked behind a steel crate as the doors exploded inward. A dozen men in tactical gear stormed in, silent. Efficient, weapons drawn, Vance's kill team. "Cover me!" Rourke yelled, dragging Kessler toward the back exit. Vincent opened fire, dropping two of the mercenaries before diving behind a stack of wooden pallets. Ethan fired, catching one in the shoulder. Another bullet whizzed past his head. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. A deep, familiar voice echoed through the warehouse. "Game's over, Carter. Elliot Vance." He stepped through the entrance, flanked by two more gunmen, completely calm. "You should have stayed in the dark," Vance said, leveling his pistol. "Now you've forced my hand." Ethan gritted his teeth. "Funny. I was just about to say the same thing." Then he pressed a button on his burner phone. Outside, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Vincent smirked. "Surprise, asshole! We tipped off every federal agency in the city." Vance's jaw tightened. "Move out!" he barked to his men. The mercenaries hesitated. The sirens were getting closer. Vance turned back to Ethan, his eyes cold. "This isn't over." And then, a flashbang detonated in the center of the room. Ethan's vision went white. His ears rang. By the time he recovered, Vance was gone. Olivia's escape plan. Meanwhile, in her penthouse, Olivia was watching the news unfold. The leaked ledger was everywhere. Federal investigators were already raiding the accounts tied to her network. Half the names on the list were issuing public denials. But Olivia wasn't panicking. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "Activate the fallback plan," she said. "A." Voice on the other end responded. "Understood." She ended the call and poured herself a drink. Ethan thought he had won. But she still had one move left. And it was going to destroy him. To be continued. The Perfect Alibi, Part 7. The phantom message Ethan's safe house was quiet, save for the occasional flickering of the overhead light. Vincent and Rourke were nursing their wounds, Kessler anxiously typing away at his laptop. The warehouse ambush had been a disaster. They barely made it out alive. But something felt wrong. Ethan checked his burner phone. The feds had locked down Olivia's accounts, arrested key figures in her operation, and put out a warrant for Elliot Vance. It should have been the beginning of the end. Instead, Olivia had vanished, and Vance wouldn't stay down for long. Then, his phone buzzed. An email. No sender, no subject, just an attachment. Rourke peered over his shoulder. "That's got trap written all over it." Ethan hesitated, then opened it. A video played. It showed Olivia sitting in what looked like a private jet. She swirled a glass of wine, smiling. "Ethan, I'm disappointed," she sighed. "After everything we've been through, you really thought it would end like this?" The camera panned, revealing something that made Ethan's stomach drop. His sister, Lily, bound and gagged, struggling. "You took my empire, but I took something you care about." Olivia's voice was calm, almost playful. "So here's the deal. You want her back? You come to me. Alone." She leaned closer. "Tick-tock, love." The screen went black. The setup Vincent swore. Jesus Christ! Ethan's hands clenched into fists. His mind raced. Olivia knew how to hit him where it hurt. She didn't need money. She didn't need power. She just needed control. Kessler typed furiously, trying to trace the video's metadata. The upload was bounced through half a dozen proxies, but he paused, eyes narrowing. She's still in the city, Ethan exhaled slowly. Then we have a chance. Vincent shook his head. This stinks of a setup. You go after her and she's got the upper hand. Rourke nodded. She knows you'll come. Ethan was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I need to call Vance. Enemy of my enemy. The room went dead silent. Kessler blinked. You want to what? Elliot Vance is the only person who knows Olivia as well as I do, Ethan said. And right now, he wants her just as badly as I do. Vincent scowled. You really think Vance is going to help you? That guy's been trying to kill you for months. Ethan picked up his second burner phone and dialed a number. After 3 rings, someone answered, a slow chuckle. Carter. Vance's voice was like broken glass, calm but sharp. I was wondering when you'd call, Vance continued. Tell me, how bad is it? Ethan got straight to the point. Olivia took my sister. I need her location. A pause. Then Vance sighed. So she's making her final play. Ethan gritted his teeth. Can you help or not? Another silence. Then, you meet me in 1 hour, Vance said. No guns, no tricks. We talk. The line went dead. The final gambit, an hour. Later, Ethan walked into a darkened parking garage, hands in his pockets. Vance stood alone, leaning against a black SUV. You actually came, Vance said. I respect that. Ethan cut to the chase. Where is she? Vance smirked. You're lucky. Olivia burned me, too. When you leaked that ledger, she used me as the fall guy. Every agency in the country is looking for me. Ethan didn't care. Tell me where she is, Vance sighed. She's in an abandoned estate up north. Old money, private security. If you walk in alone, you're dead before you hit the front gate. Ethan exhaled. Then I won't walk in alone. Vance raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we work together? You want her gone, Ethan said. I want my sister back. For the first time, Vance actually looked amused. Well, Carter, looks like we're going to war. To be continued. The Perfect Alibi, Part 8. The War Room. Ethan sat at the metal table in a secluded warehouse. This time, their safe house. Vincent, Rourke, and Kessler stood around him, arms crossed, while Elliot Vance leaned against the far wall, watching with a knowing smirk. The alliance was tense, but necessary. Vance tapped a map spread across the table. Olivia's holed up in the Blackwell estate. It's got 3 layers of security, motion sensors, armed guards, and a secondary kill team on standby. If we go in loud, we die before we hit the driveway. Kessler frowned. Then we go quiet. He pointed to a maintenance tunnel marked on the blueprints. There's an old servant's entrance underground. If we cut the power and enter through here, we might have a chance. Vincent scoffed. And what? Hope Olivia and her mercs don't hear us crawling through the walls? Rourke shook his head. We need a distraction. Ethan leaned back. Then we hit them from 2 angles. Vance smiled. Now we're talking. The plan Phase 1. Rourke and Vincent would cause a diversion at the estate's main gate, drawing the guards away. Phase 2. Ethan, Vance, and Kessler would infiltrate through the underground tunnel. Phase 3. Ethan would extract Lily, while Vance dealt with Olivia his way. No room for mistakes. No second chances. Vincent handed Ethan a silencer. You sure about this? Ethan loaded his weapon. No, but I don't have a choice. The Blackwell estate, infiltration Rangan AM. The sky was pitch black, the wind carrying a slight chill. From their vantage point in the hills, Ethan could see the massive estate sprawled across acres of land, its lights glowing like a fortress. Then, boom. A distant explosion erupted near the front gates. Rourke's voice crackled through the comms. "That ought to get their attention." Shouts, alarms. Guards scrambled toward the front, leaving the side entrance unguarded. Ethan, Vance, and Kessler slipped inside. The tunnels were damp and smelled of decay. "God, this place gives me the creeps," Kessler muttered. "Shut up and move," Vance whispered. They reached the end of the passage, a rusted door. Beyond it, Olivia's domain. Ethan counted down. 3, 2, 1. They pushed through. The betrayal, the moment they stepped into the hallway, gunfire erupted. Vance shoved Ethan down, rolling behind a marble pillar as bullets shredded through the walls. "Ambush!" Kessler shrieked, diving for cover. Ethan gritted his teeth. Olivia knew they'd been expected, and then her voice. "Oh, Ethan." He turned toward the grand staircase and saw Olivia standing at the top, dressed in black, her blonde. Hair cascading over one shoulder, she looked untouched by the chaos. "Did you really think I'd let you just walk in and take what's mine?" she asked, tilting her head. Ethan raised his gun. "Where's Lily?" She smiled. "Safe, for now." Vance cursed under his breath. "She stalled us!" Ethan's blood turned to ice. If Olivia knew they were coming, then she wasn't just playing defense. She had a counterattack ready. And then the house exploded. The double-cross flames erupted from the west wing. The blast threw Ethan and Kessler against the wall. Smoke filled the air. Vance groaned, pushing himself up. "That wasn't Olivia," Ethan coughed. "Then who?" A new voice rang out. "Surprise, gentlemen." From the wreckage, a figure emerged. Daniel Graves. Ethan's mind reeled. "No, that's impossible." Daniel had been one of Olivia's former fixers. He'd vanished years ago. But now, he was back. Graves grinned, holstering his gun. "Olivia's not in charge anymore." Ethan's stomach dropped. This wasn't just about Olivia. This was bigger. And now, they were all trapped inside, to be continued. Would you like the next part to focus on Ethan's escape, Olivia's fate, or Daniel Graves's real plan? The Perfect Alibi, Part 9, Trapped in the Inferno. The fire spread rapidly. Smoke curled through the marble halls of the Blackwell estate, choking the air. The explosion had collapsed part of the west wing, blocking the main exits. Ethan's ears were still ringing. He pushed himself up, coughing. Kessler was on his knees, disoriented, while Vance was already moving, always one step ahead, even in chaos. And then there was Daniel Graves. The former fixer stood tall amid the wreckage, adjusting the cuffs of his designer suit like a man who had orchestrated every second of this madness. Olivia was still at the top of the staircase, her smirk replaced by something more dangerous. Fear. "Graves," she hissed. "You're supposed to be dead." Graves chuckled. "You of all people should know. I never stay buried for long." Then he turned his cold gaze to Ethan. "You've been chasing the wrong target, Carter." Ethan aimed his gun. "Where's my sister?" Graves smiled. "Alive, for now." Vincent's voice crackled through Ethan's earpiece. "What the hell is going on in there? We're seeing fire from the outside." "Change of plans," Ethan growled. "It's not just Olivia anymore. Graves is back." A long silence. Then Vincent cursed. "Graves? As in, the guy who makes people disappear? You're screwed, man." "No kidding." The new puppet master, Olivia clenched her fists. "You set me up." Graves gave a slow nod. "You always thought you were the queen of the board, Olivia, but you were just another piece." Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. Graves had planned everything. Olivia's downfall, Ethan's arrival, even the fire. He wanted them all here. Ethan tightened his grip on his gun. "What's your endgame, Graves?" The man smiled. Chaos. Then, he pulled a small remote from his pocket and pressed a button. A hidden panel in the wall slid open, and behind it, Lily, bound to a chair, eyes wide with terror. Ethan's stomach dropped. One bullet to her head, Carter, Graves mused. That's all it takes. Ethan took a slow breath. He needed a plan. Now, the twist. Olivia's redemption? Olivia's eyes flicked between Ethan and Graves. Then, she moved, faster than anyone expected. She lunged at Graves, knocking the gun from his hand. Ethan didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward Lily, untying her as Vance covered him. Graves snarled, striking Olivia hard across the face. She stumbled, blood trickling from her lip, but she didn't fall. "After everything," she spat. "You think you can take my empire?" Graves wiped his mouth. "It was never yours to begin with." Olivia grabbed a knife from a fallen guard's holster and stabbed him, right in the gut. Graves gasped, eyes widening. Olivia twisted the blade. Ethan grabbed Lily and pulled her toward the door. "We have to go, now!" Olivia looked at him. For the first time, her expression wasn't cruel or mocking. It was something else. "Regret? Go," she whispered, "before the whole place comes down." Ethan hesitated. Then he nodded and ran. The escape flames licked the ceiling as they burst into the main hall. Vincent and Rourke were already at the side entrance, firing at retreating guards. "Move! Move!" They ran into the night, the Blackwell estate collapsing behind them. The last thing Ethan saw before the house was engulfed. Olivia, standing over Graves, watching him die. Aftermath, a new enemy. They regrouped at the safe house. Lily was shaken, but unharmed. Kessler was rattled. Vincent was pissed. And Vance just smiled. "You know what this means, don't you?" he said. Ethan exhaled. "Graves wasn't working alone." Vance nodded. "You stopped Olivia, but you just made enemies with someone far worse." Ethan clenched his fists. This wasn't over. Not even close. To be continued. The Perfect Alibi, Part 10, Loose Ends and New Threats. The flames of the Blackwell estate still flickered in Ethan's mind as he sat in the dimly lit safe house, staring at a grainy surveillance photo on the table. It was Graves. Hours earlier, he had watched Olivia stab the man, twisting the knife deep into his gut. But now, Graves was gone. No body found. No trace. Just a blood stain where he should have been. Vance exhaled a slow breath, shaking his head. "You really thought he'd go down that easy?" Ethan stayed silent, his fingers curling into a fist. "I don't believe in ghosts." Kessler scoffed. "Maybe you should start." Vincent leaned against the table. "Look, we need to think bigger. Graves wasn't just some rogue fixer. He had backing. If he survived, that means someone pulled him out. And whoever that someone is, they've got power." Ethan's gaze darkened. "Then we hunt them." The message phone buzzed. Not Ethan's. Not Vance's. It was Olivia's burner phone. She had given it to Ethan before they fled the estate, just before vanishing into the night. He hesitated, then picked up. A distorted voice whispered through the line. "You should have stayed out of this, Carter." Ethan's blood ran cold. "You think you've won? You haven't even begun to understand the game." Click. Silence. Vincent looked at Ethan. "Who was it?" Ethan pocketed the phone. "The real enemy." Tracking Graves's employer, they needed intel. Fast. Vance pulled up encrypted data from an old contact, someone who had once worked with Graves before he disappeared. The name that came up? Alexander Rourke, a name Ethan knew too well. A politician. A billionaire. A kingmaker. And a man powerful enough to make people like Graves reappear when they were supposed to be dead. Vincent muttered, "If Rourke's involved, we're not just dealing with mercs and dirty fixers anymore. This is full-scale political warfare." Ethan nodded. "Then we burn it to the ground." But before they could act, the betrayal hit. the shot in the dark. The sound of a gun cocking was the only warning Ethan got. Vance's eyes widened. Kessler. Gun. Raised. Finger on the trigger. He fired. A sharp crack echoed through the safe house. Ethan dove, narrowly avoiding the shot. Vincent lunged at Kessler, but Kessler was fast. He twisted away, grabbing the encrypted drive off the table. Sorry. Carter, Kessler said, breathless. I have my own orders. He bolted for the door. Ethan recovered, drawing his weapon. But before he could fire, Kessler was gone. The encrypted drive, the only link to Graves and Rourke, gone with him. Vance cursed. We should have seen that coming. Ethan's jaw clenched. This isn't a hunt anymore, he said darkly. It's war. To be continued. The Perfect Alibi. Part 11. The shadow of Rourke Kessler was gone. The encrypted drive, along with the secrets about Graves and Rourke, was in his hands. Ethan's mind raced as he paced the room, adrenaline pumping. He didn't have time to waste. Kessler would be moving fast, heading straight to Rourke or someone connected to him. Vance was already on the phone, calling in favors, tracking leads. But Ethan's focus was laser-sharp. Rourke, he muttered, the name like a venomous bite in his throat. If Kessler's with him, then he's the key. Vincent, still simmering with anger, turned to Ethan. You're not thinking straight. Kessler knows how we operate. If he's turning on us, he's deep in it. Ethan clenched his fists. Then we go after him. We hit Rourke where it hurts. Vincent nodded. He's too smart to be caught off guard. But Kessler, he's not as clean as he seems. We find him. We find the thread. The high-stakes game Rourke's empire was vast. Political influence, high-level business dealings, and a web of power that stretched across borders. Finding him wasn't just about geography. It was about breaking through layers of secrecy, corruption, and fear. But Ethan wasn't afraid. Not anymore. They started with what they knew. Kessler's connections, Rourke's private security firm, and an underground meeting place known only to a few. The more Ethan dug, the more it became clear. Kessler wasn't just playing a double game. He was integral to Rourke's operations. Ethan met with a contact from his past, a hacker who had once been a liability, now a lifeline. I need everything, he said. Every deal, every transaction, Rourke's entire operation. Get me into the shadows. The hacker nodded. I'll do what I can, but once you go in, there's no turning back. The unexpected ally as the hacker worked his magic, Ethan's. Mind lingered on Olivia. She had helped him escape the estate, but could he really trust her? He had no answers, but the game had changed. She wasn't just another player. She was a variable that could tip the scales. Late that night, his phone buzzed. A single encrypted message from Olivia. Meet me! I know how to take Rourke down. It didn't make sense. Olivia had been playing her own hand this entire time, yet the message felt different, urgent, desperate, even. Against his better judgment, Ethan decided to meet her. The meeting. The location was an abandoned dock, the sky overhead shrouded in mist. A heavy fog rolled across the water, the air thick with tension. Ethan's instincts screamed. He had to be careful. Then he saw her. Olivia stood by a rusted shipping container, her eyes scanning the dark. Her blonde hair was pulled back, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked vulnerable. I didn't think you'd show, she said quietly. Ethan kept his distance, his hand hovering near his weapon. You're the one who called. Me here. What's this about? Olivia hesitated. I'm not here for Rourke's game. I'm here because he took something from me. She pulled out a small device, a tracking chip, and threw it on the ground between them. Ethan looked at it, confusion mounting. What is this? Olivia's eyes hardened. It's how I track Rourke, how I track Kessler. Ethan froze. Kessler? You know where he is? She nodded. I planted that chip on him when he turned. I've been monitoring his every move. His mind spun. So this was your game all along? Olivia shook her head, her voice softening. I wasn't trying to play you, Carter. I was trying to protect myself. Rourke's got control over everyone who works for him, including Kessler. I didn't want to be his pawn anymore. Ethan's grip on his gun tightened. And now you want my help? Yes, she said, her gaze intense. But you need to understand something. If we go after Rourke, Kessler won't be the only problem. Rourke's already moved his pieces. He's got people on the inside your team, Carter. The ultimate betrayal. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Olivia leaned in, her voice low. One of your own is already in Rourke's pocket. You've been played since the beginning. There's a rat in your crew, Carter, and they've been feeding him everything you know. Ethan's blood ran cold. Who? Olivia's eyes locked with his. Someone you trust. He turned away, the weight of her words sinking in. You're saying it's one of us? Before she could answer, a faint noise cut through the silence. Footsteps. Ethan turned. In the shadows, a figure emerged. Kessler. To be continued. The Perfect Alibi, Part 12. The reckoning Kessler stepped into the dim light of the abandoned dock, his eyes locked onto Ethan and Olivia. His face was cold, almost unrecognizable after everything that had happened. But there was no mistaking the glint of calculated certainty in his eyes. Ethan's grip on his gun tightened. He hadn't expected Kessler to show up here, let alone so soon. But then, he was never dealing with amateurs. Olivia, Kessler said, his voice low, almost mocking. I should have known you'd have a trick up your sleeve. Olivia's gaze never wavered. You should have known better, Kessler. You're not the only one who plays the game. Ethan took a step forward, his mind running through every possible angle. Was Kessler here to end things, or was there something more to his sudden appearance? Let's cut the crap, Ethan said, his voice steady. What do you want? Kessler smirked. You're right, Carter. We don't have time for games. Rourke's playing his final hand, and if you don't act fast, everyone is going to be in his pocket. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What do you mean by final hand? Before Kessler could answer, Olivia spoke up. Rourke's getting desperate. He's been building something, some kind of weapon, a last-ditch move to stay in control. If we don't stop him now, he'll have us all, you on your knees. Kessler chuckled bitterly. Olivia's right, but she's wrong about one thing. She's not the only one Rourke's got in his pocket. Ethan's blood went cold. What are you saying? Kessler didn't flinch. There's a mole inside your team, and they've been feeding Rourke everything. Every move you've made. Ethan turned to Olivia, the words like a dagger in his gut. Could she be the mole? But Olivia shook her head, her expression unreadable. I've been playing both sides, Carter, but not for Rourke. Kessler laughed softly, the sound chilling. That's the thing about this game, Carter. Everyone's got their price. He eyed Ethan with a knowing look. Even you, the betrayal. Within Ethan's mind was spinning. Kessler wasn't just here to taunt him, he was here with a message. There was someone inside his team, someone he trusted, who was feeding Rourke information. The walls were closing in and there was nowhere left to hide. Kessler, Ethan said, his voice growing colder. Who's the mole? Kessler's lips curled into a grin, but it was more predatory than anything else. I'm not going to give you that easy answer. You have to figure it out, Carter, but know this. Time's running out. Rourke's already made his move. He's got something planned for tonight. Olivia stepped forward, her eyes sharp. What's Rourke planning? We don't have time for games, Kessler. Kessler looked between them both, his expression suddenly serious. Tonight's the deadline. Rourke's putting everything he's got into motion. If you don't stop him now, you'll never get the chance to. And the mole inside your team, they'll make sure of it. Ethan's mind raced. The mole. Rourke's deadline. The attack that was coming. He couldn't afford to waste another second. Where's Rourke? he demanded. Kessler gave a small nod. You'll find him where you least expect, but don't say I didn't warn you. Once you walk into that trap, there's no coming back. Ethan looked at Olivia, his thoughts conflicted. She had been his ally, but how could he trust her now? Could she be the mole? Before he could make a move, a loud crash echoed from behind them. Ethan spun around, gun raised, and saw Vincent stumbling out of the shadows, blood streaming down his face. Vincent! Ethan rushed to his side. What the hell happened? Vincent gasped, trying to steady himself. Carter! They're coming! They know everything. His eyes locked onto Kessler. It was him. Kessler. He set us up. Ethan's stomach dropped. Vincent, what are you talking about? Vincent's voice faltered. Kessler's been feeding Rourke information all along. He's the mole. The final confrontation, Kessler's eyes flickered with amusement. You're finally getting it. Ethan's entire body tensed. So it was Kessler. He had been the one pulling the strings from the inside. The air crackled with tension, and just as Ethan reached for his weapon, the ground beneath them seemed to tremble. Something big was coming. Kessler smiled as if this was all part of the plan. Goodbye, Carter. Rourke will have you by the end of the night. But before Ethan could react, the explosion went off. The safe house trembled violently, sending debris crashing around them. Ethan's world went black. To be continued. The Perfect Alibi, Part 13. Aftermath. The explosion reverberated through the entire safe house, leaving Ethan sprawled on the floor, disoriented and gasping for breath. The world around him was a blur of smoke and dust. He could hear Vincent's labored breathing and the faint sounds of Olivia's voice. But everything felt muffled, as if he was trapped beneath water. Ethan blinked rapidly, trying to clear his vision, his body aching from the shockwave. The air was thick with smoke, and it burned in his lungs. He coughed, struggling to push himself up, but the weight of the debris pressing against his chest made it nearly impossible to move. Vincent! Olivia! Ethan managed to rasp, his voice barely audible. Here! Olivia's voice came through. Soft, but frantic. She was by his side, pulling him from the rubble. Her hand was firm on his arm as she helped him stand, her eyes wide with fear. Are you all right? She asked urgently. Ethan shook his head, trying to clear his mind. He felt a sharp pain in his side, but he ignored it, focusing on the more immediate danger. Kessler, where is he? Olivia's face tightened with unease. He's gone. What do you mean, gone? Ethan demanded, still reeling from the explosion. He's escaped. Olivia's voice faltered, a flash of guilt passing through her eyes. Ethan looked around, noticing the shattered remains of the safe house. The place was a wreck, everything reduced to rubble. And then he saw it, Vincent, slumped against a broken pillar, bleeding heavily from his head. Vincent! Ethan rushed to his side, but there was no movement. His pulse quickened as he checked for a heartbeat. Weak. Shit! Ethan cursed, his mind racing. He pulled Vincent's bloodied body into his arms, looking at Olivia. We need to get him out of here, now! She nodded, clearly shaken, but she was still sharp enough to act. Where's Kessler going, Carter? He can't have gone far. Ethan's thoughts churned. Kessler had set them up from the start, and now he was in the wind, possibly taking everything Rourke had been working toward with him. If they didn't stop him, everything they had fought for would be lost. But Vincent, he couldn't afford to lose him. Not now. I'll take care of Vincent. You go after Kessler? Olivia said, her voice decisive. Ethan hesitated, still holding Vincent. He didn't want to leave him behind, but he knew there was no other choice. Fine, he said, his jaw clenched. I'm trusting you, Olivia. A dangerous game Ethan hurriedly made his way out of the collapsed building, carrying Vincent as best as he could. The night air was cool against his skin. The sound of sirens in the distance, a constant reminder of how much time they were losing. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Kessler had been playing everyone, manipulating them all, but it was clear now that Rourke was the bigger threat. Kessler had merely been a pawn in his game. As he reached a safer location, a run-down building with an underground garage, he laid Vincent down on the cold concrete floor. A quick assessment confirmed that Vincent's injuries were severe, but not immediately life-threatening. It would be a struggle, but Ethan could still get him help. Ethan wiped the blood from his hands, glancing around. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. "Olivia," he muttered under his breath. "What the hell are you playing at?" He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her involvement than she was letting on. The chase. Meanwhile, Olivia was deep in the streets, tracing Kessler's movements. She wasn't sure how long she had before Rourke's men showed up to clean up whatever mess had been made. The bomb had been a signal, a declaration. Kessler was cutting ties with them all. But Olivia wasn't ready to accept that. She had spent too many years maneuvering in the shadows, keeping her secrets buried beneath layers of lies. She wasn't about to let Kessler or anyone walk away with the power Rourke had built. She tracked Kessler through encrypted channels, using her contacts and a stolen phone to narrow his location. He was headed straight for the abandoned warehouse where the final deal had been set. It was a trap, but it was the only lead she had left. As she made her way toward the warehouse, her mind raced with what Kessler had said. There was something bigger going on. Rourke was preparing something, and Kessler had been right about one thing. If they didn't stop him, it would be too late. The final play. When Olivia arrived at the warehouse, the area was eerily quiet. She approached cautiously, moving through the shadows, knowing that Kessler was waiting. But what surprised her was the faint outline of a van parked near the entrance, its doors ajar. She slipped inside, her gun at the ready. And there he was, Kessler. But he wasn't alone. "Did you really think I was just going to let you walk away?" Kessler asked, his voice cold. Behind him, Rourke's men emerged from the shadows. Dozens of them. Olivia felt her pulse spike. The Perfect Alibi, Part 14. The final confrontation. Ethan's steps echoed through the silent warehouse as he approached Kessler, the cold barrel of his gun unwavering. His muscles screamed with the exertion of his earlier injury, but he could feel the adrenaline coursing through him. This was it, the end game. Kessler's smile was insufferable, a slow, knowing grin that seemed to mock everything Ethan had fought for. He didn't flinch, despite Ethan's gun trained on him. "You always thought you were the smartest man in the room," Kessler said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But the truth is, you were just a pawn in this game, a means to an end." Ethan's finger twitched on the trigger. "This isn't a game, Kessler." Kessler's eyes gleamed. "You're right. It's a war. And you lost." Olivia's eyes flickered with disbelief as she stood at the far corner, the weight of the situation hitting her with full force. Kessler had been playing both sides all along. And now, she was just as deep in this web as Ethan was. "Why, Kessler?" Ethan asked, his voice strained. "Why set me up? Why put me through all of this?" Kessler's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Because you were always so sure of yourself, and I needed you to be. You made it too easy." Olivia's voice broke through the tension. "You betrayed everyone, didn't you?" Kessler's gaze shifted to her, almost too calmly. "Betrayal is a strong word, Olivia. I prefer strategic manipulation." Ethan's pulse quickened. "You planned everything. The bomb, the mole in my team, the information leak, all of it." Kessler nodded, unfazed. "You were never supposed to make it this far, but you did. And now, well, now we're at the final move." The sound of footsteps reverberated in the distance. Olivia tensed, her hand on the gun at her hip. Rourke, she whispered. Kessler didn't even flinch. It's too late, Olivia. He's already ahead of you. He has more power than either of you could ever imagine. Ethan's mind raced. Kessler wasn't just talking about business. It was about something more, something far bigger. And as Kessler's smug expression faded, Ethan understood what had been set in motion. You really think you can take him down? Kessler sneered. You're not just out of your depth, you're irrelevant. Just then, the warehouse doors burst open. Rourke's men flooded in, guns raised, surrounding them from all sides. Kessler stepped back, satisfied. It's over, Carter, Kessler said, his voice almost triumphant. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. Was this the end? Had he been outsmarted all along? But then something unexpected happened. A voice cut through the tension. You're right, Kessler. It's over. Ethan's head snapped around. And there in the doorway stood Vincent, bloodied, bruised, but alive. Kessler's expression faltered for the briefest of moments. Vincent, how the hell? Vincent didn't wait for him to finish. His gun was already in hand, aimed directly at Kessler. Surprised? Vincent said, his voice strained. I wasn't as dead as you thought I was. Rourke's men paused, confused. Ethan's eyes darted to Olivia, who was moving quickly, her gun already raised. She shot one of Rourke's men before anyone could react. Let's finish this, Olivia said. A shift in power in. The chaos that erupted. Ethan seized the moment. He lunged forward, tackling one of Rourke's men to the ground. Gunfire rang out. But the warehouse had turned into a battleground, with the noise and confusion spiraling. Kessler was scrambling to escape, trying to push his way through the melee, but he was cornered. Vincent stood tall, his eyes fixed on Kessler. You made one mistake, Kessler. You underestimated me. Kessler laughed bitterly, trying to back away. You think you're the hero now? Vincent's face hardened. You're not the villain anymore. That's Rourke. Without warning, Vincent raised his gun and fired, striking Kessler in the leg. He dropped to the ground with a harsh cry, his plan unraveling before his eyes. The remaining members of Rourke's crew hesitated, confused. They had been used. Kessler was down and they had no clear orders left. The standoff reached a sudden silence as the remaining pieces fell into place. Ethan, Olivia, and Vincent stood together, their guns trained on the remaining men. Kessler was writhing on the floor, bleeding heavily. Rourke's influence was waning, the chaos he'd orchestrated now spinning out of control. It's over, Kessler, Ethan said, breathing heavily, his gaze unwavering. You're done. Kessler sneered up at him, though his face was twisted with pain. You think this is the end? Rourke has everything in place. He'll win. Vincent stepped forward, his voice cold. Not this time. You're the last piece to fall, Kessler. Your betrayal ends now. The choice. Just as the tension seemed to reach its peak, a phone rang, cutting through the silence. It was in Kessler's pocket. Ethan snatched it up without hesitation, putting it to his ear. Talk, he demanded. The Perfect Alibi, Part 15, The Chase. Begins. Ethan's fingers clenched around the phone, still buzzing with the dead tone from Rourke's call. The weight of his words sank into Ethan's gut like a lead weight. Rourke was always 2 steps ahead. The war was far from over. Vincent, still bleeding but standing strong, shot Ethan a glance. What did he say? Ethan's face tightened, his voice low. Rourke's still in control. He's been playing us all along. Kessler was expendable, just another piece to his game. Olivia's eyes were sharp, her mind already working through the implications. We need to move. Rourke's not going to wait. We can't let him get away with this. Ethan nodded. Agreed. But we're going to need more than just firepower. We need intel. We need to hit him where it hurts. Vincent grunted, wiping the blood from his brow. And I've got an idea where that might be. The setup. The night was far from over. The warehouse, once a place of confusion and chaos, now felt like the calm before the storm. Ethan paced back and forth, his mind racing with thoughts of Rourke, the empire he had built, and the devastating realization that this was bigger than any of them had anticipated. "We need to get to Rourke's network," Olivia said, cutting through his thoughts. "We need to figure out where he's hiding, who's working with him, and how to stop him before he makes his next move." Vincent spoke up, his voice gravelly but focused. "I know a guy, an old contact from my days on the inside. He owes me a favor. We can use him to track Rourke's financial operations. If anyone can point us in the right direction, it's him." Ethan considered this, weighing the risks. "Fine. We'll meet him. But we need to be careful. Rourke's got eyes everywhere. The minute we tip our hand, we're targets." As the three of them prepared to leave the warehouse, the gravity of their situation hit hard. They were up against a man who had mastered manipulation, had an entire network of loyal followers, and was always one step ahead. The more Ethan thought about it, the more he realized just how deep Rourke's influence ran. And they were running out of time, unmasking the enemy. By the time they reached the rundown hotel where Vincent's contact, a man named Bennett, was hiding out, the sun had just begun to rise, casting long shadows over the streets. The air was thick with tension as the trio made their way into the dimly lit building. Bennett was waiting for them, a wiry man with nervous eyes. He had the look of someone who had seen too much. He wasn't surprised to see Vincent. He was used to the shadows, but when his gaze landed on Ethan and Olivia, it was clear he was uneasy. "Vincent, I didn't expect company," Bennett muttered, his voice hushed as if the walls themselves might be listening. Vincent waved off the comment. "This is bigger than I thought. We need your help." Bennett hesitated before nodding, clearly calculating his next move. "Rourke's not someone you just walk up to, you know. He's got his hands in every dirty little corner of this city and beyond. If you're looking for information, you'll need to start with the money trail." Olivia leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Where do we find it?" Bennett's gaze flickered to Vincent before he spoke. "There's a private bank in the city, the one Rourke uses to launder everything. You get inside and you'll find every document, every deal, everything you need to bring him down." Ethan's mind was already working through the logistics. "How do we get in?" Bennett hesitated. "It's not just a bank, it's a fortress. You'll need a key, a physical key, and that's where things get tricky." "Where is it?" Ethan pressed. Bennett looked at Vincent, his eyes narrowing. "You remember your old partner, the one who betrayed you? He's the one who has the key. If you want it, you'll have to find him first." The name hit Ethan like a slap to the face. Kessler. He should have known. The key to unraveling everything was with the man who had set him up in the first place. Vincent was quiet for a moment, his jaw clenched. "Where is he?" Bennett chuckled darkly. "Last I heard, he was hiding in plain sight. Rourke's been keeping him close, but not too close. You'll find him at the old docks in one of the abandoned shipping containers. But be careful. Kessler's not just running from Rourke. He's playing his own game now." Ethan exchanged a look with Olivia. This was it. The final piece to the puzzle was in Kessler's hands, and the only way to bring Rourke down was to take him out of the equation once and for all. The dockside showdown. The docks were eerily quiet, the air thick with the scent of salt water and decay. Ethan, Olivia, and Vincent approached cautiously, their eyes scanning every shadow. This place had been abandoned for years, but there was something unsettling about the silence that enveloped them as they moved deeper into the maze of shipping containers. "This is where Kessler's hiding?" The Perfect Alibi. Part 16. The Price of Victory. The echo of Kessler's fall still hung in the air, and despite the weight of their triumph, a deep sense of unease settled over the trio. Kessler's betrayal had been a bitter pill to swallow, but with him gone, they had only half of what they needed to bring Rourke to his knees. Ethan wiped his brow as he stood over Kessler's body, his mind still buzzing with the realization that they were far from done. We've only taken one piece. Off the board. Rourke's still out there, and he's going to come after us with everything he has. Vincent, still bloodied from their earlier confrontation, nodded grimly. He won't stop. He's a man who's too used to getting what he wants. But now, we've got leverage. We know where his money is, and we've got Kessler's connections. Olivia, her face sharp and calculating, looked at the body before speaking. We can't rest yet. There's more to this. Kessler wasn't working alone. Rourke's network is still intact, and we're walking into a hornet's nest. Ethan nodded. I agree. We need to find Rourke, but it's not just about bringing him down anymore. It's about making sure he never comes back. A sense of urgency rippled through the group. But as they began to move out of the container, an unexpected sound froze them in place. The screeching of tires in the distance. A vehicle, fast and heavy, speeding toward them. Vincent's eyes widened. It's too late. He's here. The final showdown. The trio made their way quickly out of the shipping yard, heading for a side exit where they could get to their vehicle, but the sound of the tires grew louder, closer. Ethan glanced behind him just in time to see a black SUV screech to a halt. The door swung open and out stepped a familiar figure, Rourke. His presence was like a shadow hanging over them, tall and imposing. His face twisted into a sneer, his cold eyes locked on Ethan. You really thought you could take me down that easily? He taunted, his voice dripping with contempt. Ethan didn't flinch. His gun was out in an instant, pointing at Rourke. I've got one bullet with your name on it, Rourke. You're done. Rourke didn't seem bothered. No, you're wrong, he said with a smirk. This game is just beginning. You think you've beaten me? You've only gotten in my way. And now, you'll pay the price. Olivia's hand shot out to stop Ethan. Hold on, she said, her voice a warning. This is what he wants. He's trying to provoke us into making a mistake. Rourke's lips curled into a grin. Smart girl, but you're still too late. The game's already over. At that moment, something clicked in Ethan's mind. Rourke had been manipulating them from the start, setting them up to take each other down. Every move they'd made had been part of his plan. Kessler's death, the clues, the meetings, all of it. You're right, Ethan said, lowering his gun, slightly. But it's not too late for you to realize that you've lost. His eyes flicked to Vincent and Olivia. We've got the evidence, the money, the connections. Rourke, you've been living in the shadows for too long, and now the light's shining on you. Rourke laughed bitterly. You think you've won? You think you have anything on me? You're still in the dark. You don't even know who's really pulling the strings. Ethan's pulse quickened. There's more to this than we thought. What are you talking about? Rourke's eyes gleamed with a twisted satisfaction. I've been the face of this operation for years, but I'm not the one you should be worried about. He stepped forward, a look of amusement in his eyes as he tilted his head. There's someone else, a much bigger player, someone who's always been one step ahead of both of us. Before Ethan could react, the sound of another vehicle pulling up drowned out his thoughts. This time, it wasn't just one. It was a convoy. Several vehicles packed with men in suits, looking more like corporate operatives than street thugs. Vincent's expression hardened. This is bad. We've walked into a hornet's nest and Rourke's just opened the door wide. The truth revealed. Out of the first vehicle stepped a man Ethan hadn't expected to see. Rourke's superior. A man known only in whispers. Elliot Vance. Elliot Vance was a ghost in the world of corporate intrigue, a man who had once vanished. Without a trace, rumored to have made enemies far beyond the reach of law enforcement. His reputation was built on secrecy, manipulation, and a history of getting things done at any cost. Rourke's expression shifted from confident to strained as Vance walked toward him. I thought you could handle this, Rourke, Vance said coldly, his voice sharp and calculating. But you failed me? Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. This is the man behind the curtain. Rourke didn't dare to respond. Instead, he looked to Ethan, his smirk fading into something darker. You've been playing into my hands the whole time. You think you've won, but you're nothing but a pawn in this game. The Perfect Alibi, Part 17. A Shifting Battlefield. The tension between the trio and Elliot Vance hung in the air like a storm ready to break. Vance's smirk only deepened as he observed the mounting frustration and confusion in Ethan, Olivia, and Vincent. The weight of the situation pressed down on them. This was no longer just about Rourke or Kessler. This was about something far more dangerous, something global. Vance took a slow step forward, eyes locking onto Ethan. You've always been the smartest one in the room, haven't you? But even you don't understand the true game you've been playing. His voice was like silk, cold and threatening. You thought you were chasing down petty criminals, didn't you? But Rourke, Kessler, they're just cogs in a much larger machine. A machine I control. Ethan's grip tightened around the handle of his gun, but he kept his voice steady. Who are you really, Vance? What's your endgame? Vance's lips curled into a grin, but it wasn't one of pleasure. It was the twisted grin of a man who reveled in being steps ahead, always calculating. Endgame? Oh, Ethan, you think this is about money or power? It's about control, the kind that lasts for generations. Vincent spoke up, his voice laced with disgust. You've been running this show all along, haven't you? Rourke was just your puppet. Vance's gaze flicked toward Vincent, eyes glinting. Not a puppet. A distraction. It's always better to have someone in the spotlight while you pull the strings from the shadows. The world is so much easier to manipulate that way. Olivia's expression was unreadable, but her sharp eyes never left Vance. You think you've won, don't you? That we're just going to give up and let you walk away? Vance shrugged nonchalantly. Oh, I don't need you to give up. You've already done all the hard work for me. You've exposed Kessler, you've taken down Rourke, and now you've put yourselves right where I need you. Ethan's mind raced. The plan had always been bigger than just exposing Rourke and Kessler. This was a calculated move. He needed to buy time. So what now? You just kill us, and the game's over? Vance chuckled, a deep, throaty sound that made Ethan's skin crawl. No, I'm not here to kill you. At least not yet. You're much more useful alive. I need you to understand what happens next. You've walked into the heart of something far bigger than any of us. This is a war, Ethan. A war that spans continents, that changes governments, that shapes history. You've been fighting in the wrong battlefield. Vincent was losing his patience. You talk like you're untouchable, Vance. You're just a man, and we're coming for you. Vance's eyes locked onto Vincent's with an intensity that felt like a pressure on his chest. I'm not just a man. I'm the endgame, and you've been playing by my rules all along. The only difference is you're too late to stop it. The turning point. Before Ethan could respond, there was a sudden, unexpected sound, a soft click. Then a voice from behind them, cold and familiar. Actually, Vance, I think you've underestimated them. Ethan whipped around, his heart racing as a figure stepped from the shadows. It was someone he thought he'd never see again. David Mercer. Mercer's face was bruised, but there was an unmistakable fire in his eyes. You didn't think you could walk away from this, did you, Vance? Mercer's voice was steady, but there was a tension in his stance that spoke volumes. Vance's smile faltered, the calm confidence draining from his face as he looked at Mercer. Mercer, you're supposed to be dead. I made sure of it. Mercer shook his head slowly, a dark smirk pulling at the corners of his lips. You always think you're in control, don't you? But you've been losing the entire time. This ends tonight. Olivia took a step forward, her eyes narrowed as she took in the scene. Mercer, what the hell are you playing at? Mercer's eyes flicked to Olivia, then back to Vance. I was never on your side, Vance. I played you, just like I played Rourke. You were always the one being used. Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. What the hell is going on? I thought you were dead, Mercer. Mercer glanced briefly at Ethan before meeting Vance's eyes. I faked it. You think I didn't know what was coming when I got too close to Kessler? I knew Rourke's days were numbered, but I also knew there were bigger things happening, things you've been too arrogant to see. Vance has been running the show, but he's not the mastermind. There's someone else pulling the strings, someone far more dangerous. Vance's jaw tightened, and for the first time, there was a crack in his cool facade. Enough of this. You're both dead, and I'm going to make sure of it. Mercer stepped closer to Ethan, his voice low and urgent. Listen to me. Vance is only part of the equation. If you want to win, you need to find who's really behind this. You can't stop him. Here, he's just the tip of the iceberg. Vance's patience snapped. The Perfect Alibi, Part 18. Unraveling the web, Ethan's mind raced as Mercer dragged him further into the maze of alleyways, the sounds of gunfire and shouting growing fainter, but still echoing in the distance. The truth Mercer had just hinted at, the real puppet master behind everything, lingered in his thoughts, a dark cloud that refused to lift. Mercer, Ethan said, his voice strained as he wiped the sweat from his brow. You need to tell me everything. Who's pulling Vance's strings? And why the hell are you helping us now? Mercer didn't slow his pace. His eyes flickered over his shoulder, constantly assessing their surroundings, the same cold, calculating look he'd had all those years ago when they first crossed paths. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, Ethan, but you need to trust me. Vance isn't the real threat. He's a middleman. The real player is someone with far more resources, far more influence. Ethan felt the tension in his chest tighten. Who is it? Mercer turned, locking eyes with him. Someone you already know, someone who's been closer to you than you think, someone you thought was out of the game. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. His brain scrambled to make sense of what Mercer was implying. You're saying, yeah, Mercer cut in, his tone grim. I'm saying that the one person you've trusted above all else has been playing you from the start, and they've been pulling every string, orchestrating this entire thing right under your nose. Ethan's mind went numb for a moment as the possibility settled in. Olivia? Vincent? No, it couldn't be. His eyes narrowed. Who? Mercer gave a dry chuckle, looking over at Ethan with an expression that mixed pity with something darker. You're not going to like it, but you need to hear it. Claire, the shocking revelation. The name hit Ethan like a bolt of lightning. He froze in place, unable to move, unable to think. Claire? His wife? No, this couldn't be real. She'd been through everything with him, the betrayals, the losses, the pain. She couldn't possibly be involved in this. You're wrong, Ethan said, his voice tight, trying to hold on to the reality he knew. Claire? She's not involved in this, Mercer. You're lying. Mercer stopped, grabbing Ethan by the arm and pulling him into an abandoned building, the echoes of their footsteps loud in the silence. No, Ethan, I'm not lying. Claire's been working with Vance all along. She's the one who set up the entire mess with Rourke, Kessler, even the so-called affair. She manipulated you into playing right into their hands. She's the one who fed me information about you, fed Vance information, making sure you'd keep digging, pushing yourself deeper into a hole. Ethan's heart pounded, his head spinning as Mercer's words hit like a wave crashing over him. Claire? The one person he thought he could trust? The one person who'd been with him through thick and thin? Why would she do that? What does she have to gain? Mercer's face twisted in a grimace. You think she was ever just the sweet, loving wife you thought she was? She's been using you, Ethan. You were just a tool, another pawn in her game. Ethan stumbled back, nearly losing his balance. No, this doesn't make sense. Claire wouldn't do that. Mercer stepped closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. She didn't just do it, Ethan. She planned it. Everything from the beginning. The affair, the investigation, even your anger. It was all part of her strategy. She's not just Vance's ally, she's his equal. The words hit like daggers, and Ethan struggled to breathe. The betrayal was too much to process. His mind raced back through the past months, through every moment that had seemed normal. Was it all a lie? Think about it, Mercer continued, his voice a harsh whisper. She was always there, wasn't she? Always just slightly too perfect, always there when you needed her. She used your weakness, your trust, in the most devious way. She's the mastermind, Ethan. You've been chasing shadows, and she's been pulling the strings from the very start. Breaking point. The floor beneath Ethan's feet seemed to buckle, and for a moment, everything around him blurred. No, this can't be true. His mind refused to accept it. But Mercer's face, his cold, calculating gaze, left no room for doubt. Ethan's world had been built on lies, and now he was standing at the precipice of everything crumbling. "No," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. "You're wrong. Claire wouldn't do that." Mercer's eyes softened with a touch of sympathy. "I wanted to believe that too, but the truth is right in front of you, Ethan. She's been playing you, and now you've got to decide. Do you keep chasing her tail, or do you turn around and face the real threat?" Before Ethan could respond, a sudden sound, footsteps, loud and deliberate, brought him back to the present. He spun around, adrenaline flooding his system. His hand instinctively went for his gun, but before he could draw,